attachment. So most of our work is done with some kind of attachment, some kind of hope of some reward. So tasmat, that is why how to do work, Sri Krishna is now instructing. Satatam karyam, you have to do it continuously. Not that there is no reason why you should give up work, because there is no moment where you will not be required to work. As Sri Krishna says, I have no duties, but I still work. I constantly work to make show an example, to be an example for the entire world. So asaktaha, without attachment, constantly, satatam karyam. So he never suggests that one should be free from work at any time. But what type of work and how one should do it? It should be without attachment. Constantly perform your own duties without attachment. Karyam karma. Karya means that which ought to be done. Not all work is karma. The work karyam karma is asking you to do only that which your buddhi tells you to do. When the buddhi is developed, then you know which work one should undertake and which work one should not undertake. What leads to moksha and what leads to bondage. That idea also you should have. So only those works which do not bind you, you have to do it without attachment. For by doing duties without attachment, man verily obtains the supreme. Asakto hi acharan karma, having done these duties without any attachment, with detachment, man verily param apnoti purusha. Param purusha apnoti. That is the idea. So one reaches the param purusha, which is the goal of life. So we have to work our way, and Prakriti will make us work, as the other verses in that chapter tell us. Prakriti will make you work in any case. So Prakriti, the nature of the gunas will make you work, and depending on the nature of the gunas, the permutations and the combinations of the different gunas, one decides what is his swadharma. So swadharma is decided by the gunas, and the gunas are part of Prakriti, and gunas make us work. But if we do it without attachment, then you will find that it will not bind you. Otherwise, it will bind you more and more. Work has a tendency to create more and more bondage by creating more and more prarabdha, I mean karma, which later on goes to become prarabdha karma. So more and more samskaras are formed. But if one does the same work without attachment, then one can slowly get rid of the bad effects of the karma and somehow get released from this bondage and cycle of life and birth. So this is the verse number 19 of chapter 3. Now the steamer trip is still going on and instructions are being given to Keshav and other Brahmo devotees on Karma Yoga. So Sri Krishna is telling Keshav and other devotees, you talk of doing good to the world. I ask you, is the world so small? Who are you to do good to the world? Attaining God by performing spiritual practices, attain Him. He will give you power. Only then will you be able to do good to the others, otherwise not. Now here one has to interpret it very carefully, because in this case the idea that one should never do good work, then people will misunderstand this statement by saying that Sri Ramakrishna has clearly said, you talk of doing good to the world. I ask you, is the world so small? Who are you to do good to the world? That doesn't mean one should not do. One has to be very careful. That is why many people, including Master Mashe, did not understand Sri Ramakrishna properly and criticized the formation of Banaras Sevashrama, where a lot of work was being done. And he told the brahmacharis, if you work throughout the day, when will you do your spiritual practices? This is not what Thakur said. But Mother quickly came to the rescue and said, no, whatever Naren has planned, the work will go on like this in the Sevashrama, in the hospital. Everything will go on as it is. There will be no change. Whatever the discipline of the Sevashrama hospital demands, that has to be done. And there is no need to change the rules and all those things. So mother gave this, uh, mother was convinced that work by itself is not harmful. So here if we read carefully this paragraph, Sri Ramakrishna never says don't do work. The first thing people do after reading this paragraph or this passage is that Thakur has told us not to do work. We can't do any good work. We can't do any good to the world, so we will not do anything. You see, read very carefully. He very clearly says, you talk of doing good to the world. He said, don't do any charity or good work by thinking that you are doing good to the world. You are doing it just as an offering to God. You have to still do good to the world, but change your attitude. That is what he is emphasizing here. There is a subtle difference between not doing and doing it with the proper spirit. So therefore, constantly on one hand, Gita says, constantly perform your duties. If you feel your duty is to do good to the world, you continuously do it. That is what Banaras Sevashram and all Holy Mother was saying. You continuously go on doing. We hear of Swami Muktanandji, one Vihari Maharaj, who practically for 70 years did nothing but nursing the patients. He did not do any other work, did not do any other japa. So he was definitely doing good to the world. But he did not think that he was doing good to the world. He didn't think the world is so small that without him the Sevashrama would not run. He was just doing it as instructed by his guru and as an offering to the Lord. So he was doing in a detached way. So to do work in a detached way is what Sri Ramakrishna is telling us. Don't be attached and think that you are doing good to the world and you are doing some charity, you are doing some good work and people should thank you for that. No, if you don't do with that attitude. And if you think, that's why Sri Ramakrishna is saying, who are you to do good to the world? I mean, if you think that you are doing good to the world and that ego comes, then better don't do it. That's what he means. Attain God by performing spiritual practices. So this he is telling particularly to people who are altruistic, who always think that doing seva and doing good work alone is, uh, is the goal of life. So Sri Ramakrishna, just to put a break on them, such people, especially those who had started organizations and all, he said, attain God by performing spiritual practices. Attain Him, He will give you power. Only then will you be able to do good to others, otherwise not. So what he means is, in Sevashrama or any other ashrama, if you are constantly doing good work and doing it as sadhana, attain God by performing spiritual practices. Now, if you consider that work to be a spiritual practice, then 24 hours you can work. There is no problem. But the people think attain God first by performing spiritual practice. So they said we will first do japa and other sadhana, and then later on, if the Lord wills, if our health is good, then we will do some service to the world. That is not what is meant here. Attain God by performing spiritual practices. For those who do work without detachment, with detachment, without attachment, as an offering to God, they are already doing spiritual practices. So they are following exactly what Sri Ramakrishna is saying here. They are trying to attain God by performing spiritual practices, then attaining Him. Then He will give you power, then you will be able to do more and more good work. Otherwise, only then will you be able to do good to others, otherwise not. Only then, if we work with that attitude, then you will do real good to the people whom we are serving. Otherwise, if you do it with ego, the work will not benefit them. It will not be doing real good. The ego will come, the work will get spoiled and everything. So a devotee asks now, should we give up all work until we realize God? So now the devotee thinks that, oh, this is a nice thing, like Hajra did. He just gave up work, he left everything and came, and Thakur had scolded him. He said, no, you should go back. It is your duty because you have married, you have children, you have to look after them. Who will look after them? So, karyam karma, those which are duties by way of your own swadharma. So your swadharma tells you these are your duties, you have to do it. Otherwise, you have to, if you don't think that you have any swadharma to practice, if you, by God's grace, if you are at that stage of life, Sri Ramakrishna says, then you can meditate on God, chant His name and glories and perform daily devotions and all those things. You can continue that. That is also work. Is it not work? But even that, after doing japa and all, sadhana, if you do it with some motive in mind, then even that japa will not be useful. If you do thinking that it will give you wealth, money and all those things, then you are not doing even japa with detachment. So that's why he says you have to do all these things, perform your daily devotions. But at the same time, you have to remember that you are doing it for God and offer everything and do it in a very detached way. So the Brahmo devotee is not understanding what Sri Ramakrishna is saying, but what about worldly work, worldly affairs? So he's trying to make a distinction, and he believes that Sri Ramakrishna has told him not to look after the worldly work and the worldly affairs and just go on doing this japa and all, which Sri Ramakrishna doesn't say. He says, yes, you should attend to that too, as much as is necessary to run the household. But you must cry in a lonely corner and pray to God so that you do all these works selflessly. And you should also pray, O Lord, please lessen my worldly work, because, O Lord, I see that when I am engrossed in too much work, I forget you. So if the worldly work which you undertake, if we increase it beyond a certain limit, if we don't know where to put a break, if we just don't stick to our essentials and then go on adding more and more activities, which makes us forget the Lord. If the activity makes you, the extra activity which you do, if it makes you remember the Lord, it's fine. That's why he says you do as much as you should to maintain your family, because you are householders. So you have to work to maintain your family, to make some, to keep, to save some money and all those things which are absolutely necessary. But beyond that, if you engage yourself in useless pursuits, then there is a problem. So, and you have to pray whenever you get a chance, not that you'll have to work for the whole day to earn money, but sometime whenever you get, you have to pray and request the Lord or pray to the Lord, please lessen my worldly work so that I don't need to work so much. Even that prayer is a good prayer. Sri Ramakrishna used to say, you may not ask for other things, but you can ask that I can do more sadhana, more spiritual practices if you lessen my worldly work and reduce the amount of work I have to do to earn a decent living. So if you do that and if you are really sincere, Sri Ramakrishna says God will shower His grace and see to it that you don't have to work beyond a certain limit. So if I don't forget you, if the work which I do makes me forget you, makes me attached to the world, then see that such work becomes less and less. So he says, I think that I am doing a work in a selfless way. Even people who try to serve others and do some good work, they are very much motivated by a desire to do good, but they somehow have some hidden motive, either for name or fame. A desire for name and fame may crop up, that people should recognize my activity and the seva that I do. When I increase my giving in charity and distributing free meals. So there are a lot of people who believe that one should not only do charity but glorify that charity, so that people come to know that there so many noble people are there. So they may think we are not doing it for our own name and fame, but we just want to give publicity so that people will be inspired. That doesn't work that way. So, earlier days he had talked with Shambhu Malik. Shambhu Malik brought up the topic of hospitals, dispensaries, schools which he had built. Shambhu Malik was a rich devotee, and reservoirs and those were the things that were necessary in those days. So Sri Ramakrishna said, I said to him, you should only do that which comes your way and which appears to be of pressing necessity. This too in the spirit of not expecting any reward. So one has to use Nitya Nitya Vastu Viveka. Try to find out, is what is the work which I have selected to do really necessary? So you have to test yourself at every moment. You have to use your discrimination, whether it is Shreya or Preya. Shreya means that which is good, and Preya means that which is pleasant. Certain things give you some kind of a pleasant feeling, a joyful feeling, a temporary joyful feeling. But you have to be very careful. And sometimes some work which you have to regularly do, which is your duty, appears not to be very tasty, or appears not to be very joyful. It appears to be a burden, but it is Shreya, because even though if the pill is bitter, one has to take it, because that is essential. So the essential things have to be done, and you have to avoid other things, minimize those which are not of pressing necessity, and that too in a spirit of not expecting any reward. Don't seek more work. This is very important. See, people go and seek. It's not that they are forced to do a lot of work, but they seek. they they feel there are so many reasons. Some people feel lonely. Okay, let me do this. Let me join this club. Let me join that. Let me do this. So all these activities a wise person will not do, because he knows there is hardly any time. My lifestyle is such that even to earn something for my family takes up a great amount, a lot of time I have to spend. So after that, if I get some time, why should I not use that to do some spiritual practices? So he says, don't seek more work. If you do, you will lose sight of God. Say you go to the Kaligat temple and busy yourself in distributing alms, but you miss the darshan of Kali. So there is laughter all around, because he says your main purpose of going to Kali temple is to pray to the Divine Mother Kali and get her grace. So you should be spending most of your time in praying. But outside the temple, you can do these things after you come out. But if you miss the main darshan, if you miss the darshan, if you can't pray and busy yourself with all these other things, then you will miss the darshan of Kali. First of all, have the darshan of Kali, even if you have to push your way through reach her. Afterwards, you may or may not practice charity. You may, if you like, you may give as much as you can. After all, work is meant for realizing God. That's why I said to Shambhu, suppose Lord appears before you, what will you say to him? Please build a number of hospitals and dispensaries. The devotee never asks for such thing. Instead, he says, Lord, grant me a place at your lotus feet. Always keep me with you. Grant me pure love and devotion to your lotus feet. So this is what he told Shambhu. This is because his he was predominantly activity oriented, and he surely had a desire for name and fame. He wanted to be recognized by society, and he wanted to build different institutions and schools and colleges, and also maybe some reservoirs where his name will be prominently displayed, and that would make him famous. So it was not just motiveless work. It was not just work done without any attachment. He was fully attached to it. That's why Sri Ramakrishna is saying Karma Yoga is very hard indeed. The rituals laid down in the sacred books are very hard to practice in this Kali Yuga. Life is dependent on food, annagata prana. Too much of work is not possible. So one should calculate and find out how much of capacity we have. If we work beyond our biological capacity, and we strain our Annamaya Kosha and the Pranamaya Kosha, and then because life is dependent on food, food means all sorts of support systems. It's not just the food that we take, the information that we get. So our entire life depends on the inputs that we get through the senses. So that's why, since life is dependent on food, too much of work is not possible. So you can't do, because it consumes so much of time the work which is your bounden duty, that you cannot get time to do certain extra things. Uh, it would rather be more fruitful if one does spiritual practices in the very little time that one gets. It will all be over for the patient suffering from fever if he is given a slow acting treatment as prescribed by an old fashioned Hindu physician. He cannot last long. These days he needs fast acting fever mixture of D. Gupta. In those days there were these allopathic medicines perhaps. So the Hindu Vaids used to give, which used to act. No doubt they did not have after effects, but it would take a long time to cure. So suppose one is suffering from a high fever. So even Sri Ramakrishna says you have to first find a remedy. So also when you are in spiritual life, work may be important, but some of the work definitely can wait. If we have the choice, then it is better to use whatever little time we get for spiritual practices. It's like taking fast acting fever medicine of D. Gupta. So in the Kali Yuga, one should practice Bhakti Yoga, chanting the Lord's name and His glories and prayer. Indeed, Bhakti Yoga is the law of this age. Kalite Bhakti Yoga, in Kali Yuga, Bhakti Yoga is the law to the Brahmo devotees. So he says you also are practicing Bhakti Yoga. That is very good, because if the Bhakti Yoga is something like D. Gupta's medicine, it will act fast and remove the worldliness. But work will do it if you do work in a detached way. But it will take a lot of time. So he said we don't have so much time. So you should have a judicious mixture of Bhakti Yoga and Karma Yoga. And that's why he says, you repeat the name of God and chant the glories of the Divine Mother. You are indeed blessed. Your path is really fine. You're, you're not Vedantists. You don't like to say the world is like a dream. So here people should not confuse that Sri Ramakrishna is criticizing Vedanta. He is criticizing Vedanta for, you should see whom he is addressing it. He doesn't believe that Advait Vedanta is a path for householders. That's why he says your path is really fine. You are not Vedantists. When he says Vedantists, he means Advait Vedantists. So he says your path is not Advait Vedanta. You don't say the world is like a dream, because you cannot say the world is like a dream. Then you should not have married. You should not have had a worldly setup. You should not have chosen a worldly setup to. If that is the case, then there is no place for Advait Vedanta, because then you have to deny. You have to deny your duties. You have to deny everything. You have to say that this world is like a dream. But if you feel that one has a responsibility towards one's family, towards one's society, then one has to do it. And in that case, Bhakti Yoga is a better path, because you're not supposed to say that the world is not real. It is like a dream right from the beginning. The world becomes divinized slowly by regular practice of bhakti. The world becomes divine. You don't reject it, you just convert it from a suffering world to a joyful world. So you believe that God is a person, that is very fine. You are devotees, you will certainly attain God when you call upon Him with a yearning heart. So the only condition for people who live in the world is doing their duties unselfishly as far as possible without any attachment, and trying to spend the rest of the time with D. Gupta's mixture, like have some strong dose of bhakti yoga every day, because that is a faster way in this Kali Yuga according to Sri Ramakrishna. He says if you continuously pray and pray to the Lord, do the japa and say that please lessen my work so that I can do more japa. Not that if you lessen my work I can just go on socializing. That is not the prayer. If God answers your prayer and says, okay, I will make you work less, I'll make your life very convenient, then there is a tendency to spend the time just in either idly or in some useless pursuit. But if you are not going, that is why many times people complain, but I don't get time. But why do they need time? Are they really keen to get more time for sadhana, or they just want to enjoy themselves? If you want to, that's why sometimes God does not listen to our prayer and makes us work hard even to earn a living, because that is much better. We are at least working out our karma. But if God suppose answers our prayers and says, okay, you are asking for your work to be lessened, I'll lessen it. The moment he lessens it, we go after some toys and start enjoying ourselves. We do not use that time for spiritual pursuits. Then the karma definitely will have its effect, and then God says, no, nothing doing. Now I'll see that you have to work very hard even to earn a living. So that is how the karma theory works. So when you find that one is forced to do a lot of work even to earn a living, a basic living, the basic necessities. You see, sir, some people who slog throughout the day, just to earn a small salary to, even then they don't get, and some people seem to be working very less but earning a lot of money, which they really don't need. So maybe that is because of karma, that they might have done some hard work in the previous life. But if one has not utilized the spare time which the Lord gives us by spending it in japa prayer, then there is a likelihood that He will create circumstances that will increase your work. Even for basic sustenance, for a basic life in the world, He will create. So that is why Sri Ramakrishna is saying, you will certainly, if you call with a yearning heart and take this D Gupta's mixture, that means spend whatever time you get. You should be hungry for practicing spirituality whenever you get some time. Whenever you are busy, it is okay. Do it with a detached. Do the work in a detached way. That it is my duty as the breadwinner of the family. I have to earn. So I have to do this work. So after having done that, then the Lord sees. He sees your heart. What are you doing with the spare time? You get some spare time because of your past karma. Your work becomes easy. You're not supposed to work for 18 hours, 20 hours like some people have to do in the world. But if you are lucky enough, what are you doing with the spare time? So one has to be very careful, and if we don't utilize that spare time properly, maybe our karma will force us to do more work even to earn a living. So now we come to the next chapter, 10. Surendra's house with Narendra and others. The steamer has now returned to Kaliaghat, Calcutta. All prepared to land. Coming out of the cabin, they see that the full moon of Kozagar, the month of Ashwin, Kozagiri Purnima, they say, the bosom of the Ganges sparkles in the moonlight. The full moon is shining brightly. A carriage is called for Sri Ramakrishna after they come to the boat comes to the shore. In a little while he enters it, M and with M and other devotees. Nandalal, Keshav's nephew, also gets in. He will accompany Thakur for some distance. Then he will get down. So they are sharing that carriage and they are all about to go. When they are all seated in the carriage, Thakur asks, where is he? Meaning Keshav. Soon Keshav appears alone, smiling. He asks, who is accompanying Thakur? After everyone is seated in the carriage, Keshav prostrates on the ground and takes the dust of Thakur's feet. You see, being the leader of Brahmo Samaj, he had so much respect for Sri Ramakrishna because he knew here is a person who is so godly that he is almost like an incarnation, though he perhaps did not believe, but he believed in Sri Ramakrishna as a great saint. So he takes the dust of Thakur's feet. Thakur bids him an affectionate goodbye. The carriage rolls along the main thoroughfare, beautiful main thoroughfare of the English neighborhood. Lighted mansions adorning both sides of the road seem as if they are in repose in the mellow, serene rays of the full moon. Near the main gates are gas lights. In almost every home, English ladies are singing to the accompaniment of the harmonium or piano. Thakur smiles joyfully as he passes. Suddenly he says, I'm feeling thirsty. What can be done? What to do? Nandalal stops the carriage near the India Club, goes upstairs to get water and brings back a full Glass tumbler. Thakur asks sweetly, has the tumbler been well washed? Nandalal says, yes, it has. Thakur drinks the water from the tumbler. So Thakur has the nature of a child. You see, people like us who think we are mature would have perhaps not stopped the carriage. But when he feels thirst, he doesn't hesitate because there's no ego. What will people think? Should I do now? Should I control the thirst? He said, I'm feeling thirsty. What is there? So Nandalal, they all know Thakur is, once Thakur has takes a sankalpa, we have to do it. And they do it. But he is careful that the glass has been washed properly before it was filled. Because he believed that especially for devotees, it is very important in with from whose hands we eat or drink. Sometimes, if some impure person has touched the glass, Thakur could not drink that water. So, when the carriage starts again, he puts his head out of the window to look at the people and the horses and the carriages in the moonlight. He is happy to see them all. So, Thakur had his own childlike way of enjoying the Prakriti when he went out. And when he was not doing japa, or maybe he saw the divinity, he saw the whole world as a mart of joy. He had already realized the mother, so his happiness or his joy cannot be compared to the joy of a worldly person. He saw the world in a different way. Even if the British people were singing and there were so much of dancing, singing going on, he saw it as a vast Prakriti, the Divine Mother herself, assuming so many forms of ignorant people, of wise people, of worldly people, of saintly people. Everybody is happy to see them all. He doesn't make any distinction because he has reached that unitary vision where he sees everything with a in a very universal way. So that is the reason why he behaves like a child. A child has this universal spirit. It doesn't distinguish between people. It doesn't distinguish between black and white, rich and poor. You see, the smaller the child, the more free he is, the more he enjoys the world. He doesn't make any judgments about anybody. That is what Sri Ramakrishna is demonstrating here. That he is just looking out of the window like an excited child. He's trying to see the horses, carriages, and all the fun going on like a small child in a very, very detached way. It's not from a worldly point of view, he's looking at the world. So he's happy to see all of them, rich or poor, worldly or spiritual. He doesn't make that distinction, especially when he's in a high spiritual state. So Nandalal gets down at Kalutala, and Thakur's carriage stops in Chimulia Street at Suresh Mitra's house. Thakur calls him Surendra. He is a great devotee of Thakur. So Suresh Mitra was the one who hired the Baranagar monastery and also Alam Bazar and gave some money for Kashipur as well. But Surendra is not at home. He has gone to his new garden house. The members of the household open a room on the ground floor. Oh, he stops there because that was his perhaps a regular place where he used to visit. Suren's house, then there were two other houses, Balram's house and also other saint's house. There were some houses in Kolkata. Whenever he visited, he used to make a point, even if he was not invited, to just go and bless them because he knew they are genuine devotees. So Suren is not at home because of work, perhaps he was busy, but he has gone to his new garden house. The members of the household open a room on the ground floor for the guests. So the members of the household know whenever Thakur comes, they have to entertain him. So they just open a room on the ground floor for all the people because the carriage, all those who are accompanied, including M, get down and they also accompany Thakur. The carriage fare needs to be paid. Who will pay it? Had Surendra been there, he would have paid it. Thakur says to a devotee, ask the ladies of the house for the fare. Don't they know that their men are frequent visitors? You see how considerate Thakur is. He knew among all these devotees, those who were traveling with him, of course they could not afford. I mean, even if they could afford, it was very difficult for them to spend money. Since the carriage has been hired, he used to see that some rich devotee who had money enough to spare, they would pay the carriage hire. Thakur, of course, could not pay himself, but he did not want to be a burden on other devotees who were not so rich. So he says, see, he is like a child. He says, go and ask the ladies of the house because we have come and somebody has to pay the fare. Perhaps those people who had hired the carriage had not paid it in advance. So they expected that some devotee would pay. So then he says, don't they know that their men are frequent visitors? So perhaps Narendra lives nearby. Thakur sends for him. Meanwhile, Thakur is led to a room on the second story. The floor of the room is covered by a sheet and a few bolsters are lying on it. On the wall is an oil painting in which Thakur is showing Keshav the harmony of religions. That famous painting is still there, including Hinduism, Islamic, Christianity, different Buddhism as well as Vaishnava, Shakta and Shaiva sects. Surendra had it painted. It's a beautiful painting where Sri Ramakrishna is there with Keshav Chandra Sen with his raised hands, and he is trying to show, that painting shows that all the people, all the different religions of the world and the different sects within Hinduism like Vaishnava, Shakta and Shaiva, they all worship the same God. So that is what harmony of religions was depicted by this painting. And Sri Ramakrishna uh, is, M is pointing to that which was on the wall of Surendra's room. Surendra Mitra had it painted and then he had mounted it on a wall in his house. So M is mentioning that. Sitting there, Thakur talks happily. As Narendra enters, one of the reasons why he might have gone to Surendra's house is that Naren was staying nearby. And it was Suren Mitra himself who had asked Naren to sing. The first meeting also was arranged by him. So Thakur says, I went on a steamer trip with Keshav Sen. Vijay was there and also all these people. Pointing to him, he adds, you may ask him how I told Vijay and Keshav about Tuesday for the mother and the daughter, and that God's sport is not nourished without Jatila and Kutila. All these things. To him, was this not so? So he knows the ladies of Suren Mitra's house had missed this talk, and he wished, he was so kind and considerate that, you see, they have not listened to what I said. So he knows M is very carefully listened to all the conversations, and he was the only person among them who would have remembered everything. So he says, why don't you tell these people about the different fasts done by the mother and daughter? You know, that incident was there where mother fasts on one day and the daughter fasts for some other reason, but both of them fast, and people think that they are fasting for the same reason, but no. So also God's sports, God's sport is not nourished with Jatila and Kutila. So these are the villains, these are the people, evil people who cause a lot of trouble, but at the same time teach so many lessons. We can learn many things from the worldly people also, so that we don't fall into that trap and become like them. So Swami Premeshanand used to often say that when somebody has a problem, or whenever you see somebody is struggling to get out of this world, you should not pity him. You should be grateful to him that he is sacrificing, he is in the world so that people can see how miserable it is to go into this world. It may inspire some people not to enter into the world. So Premeshanand used to tell brahmacharis when they used to just make some fun. He said, don't make fun of these worldly people. Had they not been in bondage, how would you have got the right sense not to enter into bondage? You are what you are today because they have shown that this life, this worldly life is full of suffering. There, no doubt there is some joy, but at the same time, when you see the suffering, then people get a kind of vairagya. That is why some kind of um, uh, sorrow is necessary in life. The whole of Gita was became possible only because Arjuna had developed a Vishada. So this Vishada is a stage, and to develop that Vishada, you should have some burning examples in front of you. So Thakur was very kind and compassionate towards these disciples, these householder disciples, who were somehow caught in the trap of Maya and were struggling to come out of that bondage. So he says they also have a role to play. These people come. There are some troublemakers also. They may serve the purpose of teaching you titiksha, how to forgive and forget. So all these things are possible only if there is variety in life. That's what Sri Ramakrishna is pointing, and he wants this to be told to the members, the women members of the family of Suren Mitra. So he says, it's all God's sport. It is not nourished without Jatila and Kutila. So whatever he had mentioned in front of Keshav Sen and the gathering in the steamer is asking M to tell the people in this house, so that if they have come, they are entertaining, they are so hospitable to Thakur. So Thakur feels that one should give back something in return. So one should speak some good words so that they get some spiritual knowledge, they get the benefit of some satsanga. M says, yes, sir. It is getting dark, but Surendra has not yet come back. Thakur must return to Dakshineshwar and cannot wait any longer. He had thought of meeting Surendra before leaving, but somehow Surendra was very busy and he could not come early. So then he said, it's 10:30 at night. The road is bathed in moonlight, so they decide to go. The carriage arrives and Thakur gets in. Narendra and M salute him and return to their homes in Calcutta. Of course, M also was staying not very far from Narendra's house. So Narendra had come just to have some satsang of Thakur. Then he goes back to his house, and M goes back to his house, and the carriage which was supposed to take Sri Ramakrishna. There was one carriage which dropped them here, and another carriage was had to take Thakur back to Dakshineshwar. So then we come to another section, visit to Siti Brahmo Samaj, section 3, joyful conversation with Shivnath and other Brahmo devotees. Shivnath. So this is another chapter. The chapter 1 says Sri Ramakrishna at a religious festival. Now Sri Ramakrishna has come to visit Brahmo Samaj at Sithi. It is Saturday 20th October 1882, the second day of the dark fortnight in the month of Ashwin. It is the semi-annual celebration of the Brahmo Samaj and grand festivities are going on today. Sri Ramakrishna has been invited together with a number of other devotees. At 3 or 4 in the afternoon, they arrive at the beautiful garden house of Veni Madhav Pal. Veni Madhav Pal, who was a devotee and a Brahmo follower as well. They have come by carriage from Dakshineshwar Kali temple. It is in this garden that the Brahmo Samaj regularly conducts meetings. Sri Ramakrishna has great love for the Brahmo Samaj and its devotees love and revere him in return. Only yesterday, Friday evening, he enjoyed a steamer trip on the Ganges from the Kali temple to Calcutta with Keshav Chandra Sen and his disciples. Seti is near Paikpada, about 3 miles north of Calcutta. Located far from the din of the city, the beautiful garden house is particularly suitable for worship of God. The owner of the garden house organizes 2 festivals a year, one in autumn and the other in spring, and invites many devotees from Calcutta and nearby village of Sithi. So Shivnath and other devotees from Calcutta have come. Most of them have attended the morning service and are now waiting for the evening service. They are particularly interested because they have heard that a great saint will be there in the afternoon. Of course, Shivnath knew who Sri Ramakrishna was, but many of the other Brahmo devotees perhaps did not know that Sri Ramakrishna, they just heard that a great saint is coming, so they are very happy and have come to listen. They want to see his happy figure and imbibe the nectar of his words, and they want to hear his sweet devotional songs and watch him dance full of love for God. Such a dance is rare even among the gods. Of course, they had heard that Sri Ramakrishna sings and dances beautifully and full of ecstasy and full of love of God. So they want to see this rare event. And Sri Ramakrishna, they know when a lot of devotees assemble, Sri Ramakrishna used to often go at the slightest suggestion. He used to go into deep ecstasy, samadhi, into deep bhava, used to sing songs, wonderful songs, devotional songs. And when the songs roused his emotions, he used to even get up and dance like Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. By afternoon, a large crowd has gathered in the garden. Some are sitting on the wooden benches under the shadow of vines. Others are walking with their friends along the bank of a beautiful artificial lake. Many have already taken their seats in the Samaj house, awaiting Sri Ramakrishna's arrival. There is a betel leaf shop at the entrance to the garden. Entering the garden, one feels that it is a place for worship. In the evening, there will be a musical play in all four directions. In all four directions, the blue autumn sky reflects joy. Since early morning, a current of delight has passed through the vines, trees, shrubs of the garden, as though they, together with the sky and all creatures, are singing one melody. Even the breeze seems divinely propitious, carrying such joy into the hearts of the devotees. Now, these wonderful descriptions Sri Ramakrishna is giving, M is giving, and he has definitely been able to catch the divine spirit or the divine vibrations that have been created by the presence or the even the expectation of Sri Ramakrishna's visit. So that has created a great sense of joy because people have come with elevate in a very elevated mood. They have not come here to just do some picnic or something. They know that here Paramahamsa is coming. So that whole vibration of the place has changed. And that's why M sees that everything, even the nature, Prakriti seems to be preparing for the visit of Sri Ramakrishna. Everyone is thirsty for the appearance of Paramahamsa Deva. When his carriage arrives in front of the house, they all rise to welcome the great saint and form a great circle around him. A platform has been built in the middle of the main hall of the Samaj building. The place is filled with people. In front is the vestibule where the Paramahamsa Deva and others are seated. People also occupy the two rooms on both sides of the vestibule. Others are standing at the doorways, craning their necks to see. Even the steps leading up to the vestibule are crowded with devotees. Two or three trees near the steps support a canopy of vines, and a number of benches offer seating for a few devotees who strain their necks to see the great saint and try intently to hear him. Nearby path stretches between many rows of flower beds and fruit trees. The trees gently wave in the whispering breeze, as if bowing in joy to offer Sri Ramakrishna a hearty welcome. So this is the wonderful spirit or the wonderful atmosphere that Sri Ramakrishna has created in the Beni Madhavpal Siti, Beni Madhavpal's garden house in Siti. So when the smiling Ram Paramahansa Deva comes, Sri Ramakrishna takes his seat. The sight of all those within, those who were inside. There were many people outside also, but there are many people expecting him to go inside were already inside. Until the start of the play, the rest of the devotees walk around, some alone and others with friends. Play in the sense they just want to allow Sri Ramakrishna to settle. They know once he comes, once he takes some refreshment, and then some others have come with different purposes. They're chewing betel leaf or tobacco or smoking cigarettes. Some laugh, others are engaged in worldly discussions. So there is a variety, big crowd with lot of diversity in their attitude and their moods. And the full attention of the audience is directed to the play. Like so many bees when the lotus blooms, their attention is drawn from the other flowers of the garden and they swarm to the nectar of the lotus. So Sri Ramakrishna has been compared to a wonderful lotus. And till now, till he came, Sri Ramakrishna came, they were like bees. Some enjoying the world, some enjoying tobacco or smoke or something, some discussing their worldly things, their money and their career and all those things. But the moment Sri Ramakrishna comes, that is the lotus blooms, the spiritual lotus blooms, and the bees, the mind bees which are compared to the mind of the devotees. All the bees leaving all the other flowers, they come because the lotus is so attractive, it has bloomed. So they come to take the nectar of the lotus. So before the conversation, now chapter 2, Bhagavad Gita verse number 14, verse number 26, chapter number 14 is being quoted. Mam cha yo vyabhichareణ bhakti yogena sevate sa gunan samatityatan brahma bhuyaya kalpate. So he who serves me with unswerving devotion goes beyond the three gunas and is fit to merge in Brahman. So the importance of devotion has been explained because the Gunatraya Vibhaga Yoga is what chapter 14 is. What are the different gunas? So the Sri Krishna is telling Arjuna that these three gunas determine your profession, they determine your duties, your swadharma and all those things. But even in spite of all these things, if you serve me with unswerving devotion in the midst of all this play of the gunas, then you can go beyond the three gunas and become fit to merge in me, Brahman. So the way to Brahman has been shown here, that if we want to reach Brahman, then we have to serve God, maybe a personal God who has come as an avatara. And that devotion, unswerving devotion, will help you to go beyond gunas. Otherwise, we will be caught in the bondage of these three gunas. Prakriti has a tendency to bind you, make you more gross, make you go towards uh, your lower personality, the lower koshas. So Sri Krishna is saying, Bhagavad Gita, Sri Krishna is saying that who serves me, who does all the work with the spirit of dedication, dedicating all his work to me, and with one pointed devotion or bhakti yogena sevate, he does that seva, goes beyond the three gunas. So now the conversation with devotees start. Smiling, Sri Krishna looks at Shivnath and other devotees and says, "Look, here is Shivnath. You see, you are a devotee. I feel so happy to see you. This is the nature of a man who is addicted to smoking hemp. He feels happy when he meets another hemp smoker. He may even embrace him." Shivnath and others laugh. Now, through this example, it may be a very simple example, but it shows that people normally, as the English proverb goes, birds of the same feather flock together. So we know for sure that people who have come here, only those who are of the same mind or of the same nature or of a similar nature, not exactly the same, but who have similar interests, similar yearning, similar tastes and attitudes towards life, they only will enjoy the company of Sri Ramakrishna. And as it used to happen, some people used to come to Dakshineshwar and sit in the boat. They said, "We'll rather enjoy the beautiful Ganga and the breeze here. You go, you finish it and then come." Because their minds were not tuned. Their worldly minds did not have the capacity to understand or feel or to catch the vibrations. So Sri Ramakrishna is giving a very simple example, saying that hemp smokers are normally very much addicted to that smoking. So throughout the day, that addiction is so strong that they will be always looking to somehow at some part of the day go and join the company. They won't smoke alone. They always want to smoke in a group. That's why there are so many groups of these smokers. They get that inspiration to smoke when they are in that company. So they are always yearning for that. So that's why Sri Ramakrishna says that throughout the day I feel so many people whose minds are worldly coming to me. So I don't feel like talking about God. But when such people like Shivnath, he says, people like you come, I feel as if that I am a hemp smoker and you are also a hemp smoker, and both of us enjoy each other's company. Hemp smoking here means devotion or the love of God which is common to Sri Ramakrishna and Of course, some devotees like Shivnath, M and others. So when I see a person whose mind is not on God, I tell him, please go sit over there. Or I say, go see the beautiful buildings, go see them. Even all laugh. Even in Dakshineshwar, the moment Sri Ramakrishna found that the vibrations are not proper, there are some people in this group who are restless and who are not appreciating the talk and who will not appreciate what is being spoken. So they just want to come, they have come because somebody else has brought them. So Sri Ramakrishna would immediately notice that, read their minds and say, why don't you go? There's some beautiful buildings, beautiful garden. See the buildings and then come. So Sri Ramakrishna was very shrewd. He could feel the vibrations. And I see that some people who come here with devotees are not of a serious nature. They are worldly minded. They don't like spiritual talk. Devotees like to talk about God for a long time, but these men cannot sit long. They become restless and whisper into their friends here, when are you leaving? The devotee sometimes says, wait a while, we will be leaving shortly. But they are so impatient and say, all right, carry on, we will wait in the boat. So everybody laughs. So this is typical of Sri Ramakrishna. He could he could make out from a group of people how many are really keen to listen about these spiritual truths. How many are really serious? If they are really serious, then only they will enjoy. Otherwise, they will find it a big burden and they will simply leave. If you ask worldly people to renounce everything and devote themselves to God, they don't listen to you. That's why to attract worldly people, Gaur and Nitai, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, and they, two brothers, thought up a stratagem and involved soup of magur fish and embrace of a young woman and repeating the name of God. So they somehow wanted that these people who are very much attached to uh, the world should be somehow attracted. So embrace of a young woman, of course, to a very worldly person would be very attractive, and magur fish was a delicacy. People used to, so he used to tell them, why don't you come? He was so keen, Gaur and Nitai, they were so keen that somehow once people come to the Lord and start enjoying, they will change. But in the beginning, they have to be called. So you have to tempt them by saying this. But really, first they think that it is literally true, the magur fish and the embrace of a young woman. But in the beginning, many people came to chant the name of the God, tempted by the first two. They said, if you chant the name, you will get these two things. The magur macher jhol, or the embrace of a young woman. These two things you will get. And after having come here, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu explains what he had meant. He did not mean that he will literally give them that. But if you taste a bit of the nectar of the Lord's name, they realized that the fish soup was nothing compared to the tears that fall for the love of God. So they started shedding tears. So that was what he meant when he said the soup of magur fish. And a young woman meant the earth. The embrace of a young woman meant to roll around in the dust for love of God. So they used to all jump into ecstasy. When Chaitanya Mahaprabhu used to sing the Kirtana, so they, Chaitanya and Nityananda was his disciple. So Gaur and Nitai, that's why they were called as Gaur and Nitai. So it was a familiar name of Swami Nityananda, disciple and companion of Chaitanya. So when these two people wanted to attract, they used to use these tempting things. So also perhaps here many of the people have come for a feast, knowing fully well that there would be a great feast, some songs and some other entertainment, not knowing fully well what was in store for them. And naturally, people would be attracted by this. So Thakur said there's no harm in tempting them with these things, provided they come and slowly they will start enjoying the taking the name of the Lord and slowly develop love for God. So we have just finished. It is 7 o'clock.